Hello, huddlers. 5 months ago, Tahnee Perry joined us for a conversation on building an AI-powered marketing team. During that huddle, Liza Adams popped in towards the end on request, and the conversation was so flocking awesome, we decided at that moment to bring them back again together. So here we are with two of the leading AI orchestrators who've been at the forefront of helping marketing orgs not just adopt AI, but truly operationalize it. So think of this as an ATA, like an AMA, but an ATA as an Ask Them Anything. Please put your questions in chat. If we don't get them to all of them now, we will after the recording. And so one last note, both Liza and Tahnee will be speaking at the CMO Super Huddle this November using the Pechakucha style lightning talk format, which I think is a first for both of them, but it'll be super. They're going to enjoy it. Anyway, today's huddle offers you a sneak peek of their thinking. So hello, Liza and Tahnee. How are you and where are you? We'll start with Tahnee.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's always a great group to join. So thank you. I am calling in I live just outside of San Francisco. So I am West Coast based.
All right. And Liza.
I'm joining you from Boulder, Colorado. It's going to be beautiful here today and excited to see everyone again.
It is going to be beautiful here today. And so we've got this country covered at this point with the three of us, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, or Mountain Time. So it's all good. Well, Marshall's here from the Midwest. So we got it. We got it all covered. Anyway, let's dive in. And, you know, one of the things we like to do in these things is just in case the audience needs to leave early or we need to convince them to stay, let's propose two of the most common mistakes or blind spots you're seeing as CMOs try to build AI-powered marketing teams. I'll let you decide who goes first.
I can jump in, and then Lisa, if I miss anything, let me know. I think the biggest mistake that I see CMOs and leaders make is not dedicating enough time to change management. People get really excited about the tools and the shiny new object and, oh, there's this amazing workflow, and they just expect people to naturally dive in. And you are going to have some people on your team who already have that ability within them and they're excited about all of these new innovations, but you're going to have people on your team that this is very scary and they don't like it and it's going to be difficult for them. And you need to think about how do you bridge that gap for them, because some people it's hard for them to figure out on their own. And as a leader, I think your job is to think through the process and then at least dedicate some time to it. And, you know, Lisa and I have worked on a couple of different projects together, and the ones that always work the best are the ones where they're taking the time and they give their people the space to make the mental adjustment. And I think, you know, so it's dedicating enough time to think through the process and then time for people to make that natural transition themselves.
Got it. Okay. And I want to go into that in a little bit more detail, but Lisa, give us another sort of area that you see.
Yeah, so Tahnee took the best one.
Okay.
That's why I went first.
Yes. But the other one that I'm now seeing is, and this is not all CMOs, right? But there are certain CMOs that feel that they don't necessarily need to put their hands on keyboard. Teams need to put their hands on keyboard. And I think unlike previous innovations, you know, many of us have been around for a long time. We've gone through internet, cloud, mobile, social, SaaS, now AI. In other innovations, we didn't necessarily have to be, you know, hands on keyboard or actually using those technologies. This is one where until we put hands on keyboard, we do not truly understand what's possible. And if we are going to inspire and lead our teams through change, we need to be empathetic to that journey. And to be empathetic, we need to know how to use these tools, understand their limitations, and understand their capabilities. So this is not just for us as leaders for our careers, but also for us to drive change and really empathize with our teams.
I love it. They're great. Both of those are important enough. Let's go through them one at a time, a little bit more detail. So the the change management and taking the time, Tahnee, when you talk about that, the whole emphasis on speed is one of the outcomes of having a tool like this, because suddenly you can do things faster. But training isn't necessarily something that you can do faster. So there's a contradiction here. Wait, we have to slow down to train so we can speed up. Is that the idea?
Yes, exactly. I think don't shortchange. I mean, yes, you want to be moving fast, but I think there's a difference between hesitating and waiting to see. Like I've been hearing a lot of people say, "Oh, we're waiting for the dust to settle, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do." Like, no, 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 the dust has settled. Like, stop waiting and move into implementation. That doesn't mean to rush it though. So take the time for each of those steps. So I think identify as a leader, it's your job to identify like, what are the next steps? When do we take them? And don't hesitate. I think that is the key.
Right. And so we're really talking about, again, the three roles of leadership of one is, set the vision. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Build the team and then allocate resources. So the CMO needs to have a strong point of view on how you're going to at least initially use these tools and get up to speed. So that's one. And that sort of leads into, Liza, your point of view. How far do you think CMOs need to go when it comes to, getting their hands on the keyboard?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always get this question, where do I start, right? As a CMO, where do I start? And there's so much that we can do. The first thing that people gravitate towards is really productivity, right? Help me do things faster. And we have all sorts of things that we need to do faster, right? From crafting emails to responding to questions and all those things, which is great, right? But especially for leaders like us, CMOs, we get hit with really strategic questions. How do we allocate budget? We now have a new competitor in the space. How do we position against them? How do we now elevate our messaging? Just using AI as a thought partner, I think it's just one of the best places to start. As marketing leaders, we have hypotheses, we have assumptions. We often don't know the right answers right away, right? So put in your assumptions and hypotheses and your thinking and your frameworks into AI and ask it to critically give you feedback, to challenge your assumptions, challenge your hypotheses, give you a different point of view. Because AI has a positivity bias, you will feel like a rock star if you don't ask it to challenge you. But that's how I use it. And it's really insightful to see your blind spots. And it's humbling to see your blind spots. And the beauty of it, it doesn't judge. So
Right.
like people,
Could
right?
you have missed this, you dope?
That's
Right.
right.
It doesn't do that. So it's funny, you've been doing this a long time. And I think that if we go from this step of where do you start, the challenge, I think, for a CMO, and I'll tell you a funny story. In one of our huddles, a CEO put in a chat, a prompt that said, "Hey, our competitors just raised our price. Should we raise our price?" That was it. That was the whole thing. And it said, "Yes, you should raise your price." So that became almost the directive from the CEO. And obviously, so garbage in, garbage out. There's a lot of the things is you don't really know what you don't know. And when you're getting started and you say, okay, be a thought partner, you really have to put a lot of context in order to get good results. So how do you know when you have enough?
Well, but I'd also say it's the approach you take. I never recommend asking ChatGPT or your LLM, your large language model, for the answer. I think the point, Lisa, is right. It's about the process and helping you think through the problem. So what they should have said instead is, this is what's happening in the market. Help me think through all of the different scenarios. Use it as a scenario planner. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're asking it for the answer, you might get the wrong answer, and then what do you do?
Right. And you really aren't looking for, you are eventually, but part of this as a thought partner is think it through. I'm going to just pause on that. And I want to ask all of you that are listening right here live, are you asking for answers, or are you asking for help to think a real problem through? And then as you're thinking, working with it, it should be asking you questions about information, but you probably also know context that you can add. So, okay, good stuff. I want to go back now to the hands-on part of this a little bit more, because I wanted to produce, we're doing another show next month on video production. I had never used AI to create a video. I'm not a videographer or editor, but I thought, how hard could it be? Turned out it was pretty hard. But I went through the process. And so now I have a great deal of empathy, and I understand what are the tools, what can they do, where are the gaps, when do you need professionals, and all that. And I wouldn't have known that. I might have just said to somebody, hey, go produce a video. Talk a little bit about, a little more, when you want CMOs and so forth to be hands-on, to get their key. What does that mean? What does that look like, Liza?
From a video perspective?
No, forget video. That's not the least of their worries. No,
I was missing
sorry.
the
I just
question.
use that as an example of, when you get hands-on, you get a better level of insight into what the challenges are in a particular, in that case, a production challenge.
Yeah, and what was your question then?
So my
Drew?
question is sort of, again, where is it important that, how deep do CMOs need to get?
Oh,
Do they need
yes.
to get into the script to see what it can do? Do they need to, is it mainly understanding how to use it as a thought partner? How far do we need to go?
No, we don't actually need to go that far, right?
Okay.
Because what I tell people is we have to inspire ourselves based on the role that we're in, right? So think about your role and think about how it might help you. Start there, right? Because when we understand how it can help us in our role, and it could be for productivity purposes, it could be to increase quality. And then the third thing would be, hey, can we actually reimagine things? So it's not just better, faster, but also different, right? So use AI to begin to reimagine things. But those same three things, once you understand how it does it for your role, others on your team can begin to apply it, right? So a content marketer can begin to say, all right, how can I use this thing to improve productivity? How can I use this thing to improve quality? And then how do I use this thing to actually reimagine the work? So as a CMO, we don't need to like deeply understand, the use cases by marketing function. We need to have some level of understanding, but start with our own role and figure out how we could do those three things first, if that makes sense, Drew.
It does, but I want to push back a little bit. First of all, I appreciate the categorization of thinking about productivity, quality, and reimagining things. That's a great sort of framework. I think a lot of the emphasis has been on productivity. Can we get this done faster? And I think that has sort of seeped up to the C-suite, where one CMO was asked by their CEO, hey, I think you can do marketing with 80% less staff. So just on efficiency, right? Not on productivity, not on quality. And in fact, I think there's a huge risk right now that the efficiency is not leading to quality. They're
That's
not,
right.
Sometimes they are, you can be efficient and just get garbage out. So let's talk a little bit about how, and by the way, a CMO right now is having to answer that question and push back on the CEO on this productivity question. I mean, and then maybe this is a good time to get into a use case, because I'm all over the place here at the moment, and you presented a great framework, but can you give us an example of, and we'll just focus on productivity, and maybe we'll go to quality in the next one, and then we can talk. So either one of you want to share an example of where somebody you've worked with has found some incredible productivity gains?
Yeah, I've got a couple, but given that you talked about video, this was actually a client that Liza and I worked on together, and we consulted with their content development and video team. And they had, I think it was 3 people who worked in video production, and their job was to basically take orders from the marketing team, who would say, hey, we have this new product. Can you create us a promo video or an explainer, whatever it was? And their original process took 6 weeks, because what they would do is they'd have the kickoff meeting, they would talk about what they wanted, and then the video team would go off and they would do their research, they would storyboard, they would come back in 2 weeks and they would look at this beautiful storyboard and they say, yes, no, let's make changes. And they would go round and round in these meetings until they got to the final point where they were happy and they'd go into final production. With AI, we helped them create a process where in the very first kickoff meeting, they would ideate and storyboard, and they would have the entire plan set in that first meeting. And what they were using is a combination of ChatGPT for ideas. They used Canva's storyboard feature to build out the storyboard that they could look at, because they found that the marketing team needed those visuals to really understand what the final piece would look like. And they cut down their entire process to 2 weeks and they'd have something final. So that's huge productivity gains. And also it's effective because the teams were working, they had a much tighter feedback loop, so they were happier with the final product. So that's a use case where you get both. You get efficiency and better outcome.
Right, and better buy-in, because there's not a lot less guesswork. Because I mean, particularly using Canvas storyboards, you're not going to have this where you go out and produce and they go, that's not what I thought of, right? That's not the look and feel. So this really is, that's a great story. Liza, do you have another example?
Yeah, I do have another example that leads into the quality piece. First, we started with productivity, and the team was using it for content creation, and we all know those use cases, right? It could help us create blogs and reports and all sorts of things. But they found that it wasn't quite landing. The content didn't have the quality. It wasn't as relevant. It wasn't personalized to the buyer's journey. And in AI search, you have to create content so relevant that it directly answers the question or the inquiry of the user in AI search for the AI to actually serve you up. Because if you don't answer that question directly, if your content and brand doesn't answer that question directly, you're not going to get served up and we're not going to get cited, right? So a big problem. So one of the key things, beyond productivity, what we did was we need to better quality content. So now we are using AI to actually figure out what these questions are at the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel that customers might be asking. And what we did was we used customer reviews, publicly available customer reviews, G2, Capterra. We also used customer testimonials, Gong transcripts, all sorts of things to then ask AI, infer from these customer reviews, transcripts and testimonials and publications, what might be these inquiries at the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. Based on that set of questions, so it gave us a response, we then validated that. And then based on that, the validated set of questions, we then created the content to respond to those questions directly. So now it's not just productivity. Now we have improved content as a result of that research and validation that we did.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. One note, I feel like every website somewhere has to answer every question that the customer wants, and that there's Q&As is a new part of content marketing in general. But what's so inspired about this one is that you're not guessing at what the content is. You actually have a body of information that is informing that. And I think if you think about that as a general rule, it's the more original content and information you provide up front at the top, the better output you're going to have.
That's right.
But if you start with a blank slate and say, hey, write a blog post on this, you're going to get garbage. But if you say, take all of this information and quote it and use it, now create something, you're going to end up with a better output. Fascinating and good. Okay, we have a couple questions from the audience. We might as well get right to them. This one's for Liza. What advice do you have for successfully making the case to your CEO and executive team for creating AI agents that can help augment and extend the effectiveness of your marketing staff? If you want a phone a friend or pun on this one, it's okay.
This is one of my favorite questions because it is truly rethinking marketing and reimagining our organizations, right? And many of us have this challenge where marketing is seen as a tactical organization, and we are seen as non-strategic I'm not going to generalize for all, but there are many marketers and many marketing organizations that are seen that way. And I've also said before that, it's one of the biggest reasons why we're not on boards as CMOs and heads of marketing. So I love it when a CEO says, hey, tell me about, your evolution of marketing with the use of AI. Because I go straight into the evolution will go from org charts to work charts, where org charts will no longer just be human beings. We will now be using AI as teammates. And these teammates will be built, maintained, and managed by the humans. And what does that do? We will relegate a lot of the mundane and repetitive tasks to the AIs to free us up to do more strategic work. So what do you mean by strategic work, Liza? Well, guess what? We're going to figure out product market fit, because we can't, just like we can't out-exercise a bad diet, we can't out-campaign a bad product market fit. So now we have the capacity to figure out good product market fit, right? When we do that, when we campaign, it will land and we will not be wasting resources. So that's a really tangible thing that I share with the CEOs. And then we talk about, okay, Liza, what are these teammates? So I'm like, okay, product marketing, let's pick on that. They create battle cards, they create decks, they create pitch decks, in addition to all of the strategic things that they do, segmentation, targeting, and positioning, and messaging, and all sorts of things. If we had AI assistants or AI teammates that created these pitch decks and created these battle cards for them, can you imagine how much better they can do on segmentation, targeting, and positioning? Same thing on digital, same thing on demand gen, same thing in the other organizations. So I think this notion of crafting a story such that marketing is now viewed as strategic and truly a growth engine for the business, rather than simply saying, hey, we can make this efficient and we can be more productive. I think that doesn't bode well. I think that brings us down the path of how many people can you lay off in the next 6 to 18 months. So,
right. As opposed to saying we can create superhumans and we're going to get so much more done. We're going to get the efficient stuff out of the way. We're going to be more productive, but more importantly, we're going to be spending our time in places that are going to have a dramatic impact on the business.
That's right.
I love that perspective. And in many ways that has been the path of automation thus far, augmentation versus replacement. But there is a lot of fear about replacement. So Tahnee, what's your take on this?
Well, there used to be this phrase that, AI is not taking your job, but someone using AI will. I actually think that's just a false reassurance, because AI is taking jobs. The thing is, it's taking the repetitive ones where it's a lot of hunt and peck. So I think people who fill in spreadsheets, there's been a lot of impact on graduate jobs, right? Those entry-level intern roles where you just have to do a lot of rote work. So I think we all just have to be honest and say that those kinds of jobs, there's going to be less of them, and maybe soon none of those. So as a person who's moving into a career, what kinds of things do you need to be skillful at? You need to understand how to use AI, and you have to understand how to drive value, and more value at a higher level, because to get into a position, you're going to have to prove that. I think as a CMO, your job is to have a look at your entire organization and find the places where you can automate work and the places where you still need humans in the loop. Places that require judgment, creativity, taste. AI has no taste. And what we're finding is, I think this was Andy Crestodina who quoted, or who coined the term, is like, AI is creating the average information because it's been trained on the world's information. So you get the average of that. So if you want to create something that has a point of view, it stands out, it differentiates your brand, you're going to need humans for that. So as a CMO, it's your job to figure out, what do you give to the AI and what do you keep for the humans?
Hey, can I add to that, Drew?
Please.
Quick. I'm looking at the chat and I want to answer the question, but I'm like, my fingers are not fast enough. So there's this question around, well, it wasn't a question, it was an observation that the CEOs go straight to replacement rather than augmentation, right? Which is such a typical, I'm hearing it more and more now. my initial response about a week ago, somebody asked me this questions, and I said, you know what, if they go straight to replacement versus augmentation, then they probably feel that there was already bloat in marketing. And they probably feel that marketing wasn't as strategic and probably thinking about it more tactically, right? And if they go down the other path of augmentation, maybe they do feel that there's value in marketing, and what they want to do is to get more of that value with the use of AI. But then as I think about it more, I'm now running into a lot more companies where it's driven by EBITDA, right? So it's sustainable profitability. And when you go to sustainable profitability, you're looking at the spend, and the spend, typically the highest spend area is people. So that's what gets picked on, right? So this whole notion around, hey, how do we reduce the number of people and help us with profitability is coming to be. And I think as CMOs, we need to really anticipate this question and get ahead of that question before it gets asked of us. So one of the key things is, I think the upskilling and reskilling of the workforce is first and foremost. And I think about it in 3 layers, right? There's the senior team, senior executives, mid-level management, and then entry level. And I'm just formulating my opinions on this. So you guys, I'm open to be challenged on this because I've never gone down this path. We all have hypotheses. But I think at the senior levels, we need to figure out how to use AI to help us understand and do jobs that are 1 to 2 levels below. Middle management needs to understand how to use AI so that they can perform 1 to 2 levels above or 1 to 2 levels below. And then entry levels need to figure out how to use AI, how to perform their jobs 2 to 3 levels above them. The reason why I'm framing it that way is because I believe what Tahnee is saying, there will be less. And those that have the ability to flex and go down, up, essentially sideways too, will have much better potential of keeping their jobs when things, when the board and when the CEO says, hey, it's about people, it's about EBITDA, the chosen ones will be the ones that can do much more than what they're doing today, up and down, if that makes sense.
I'm going to weigh in here on a couple of fronts. One, there is no proof yet that a company that has more bots than humans is actually going to be more effective. We already know the use cases of Klarna where they, turned it all over. It's an apocryphal story. And obviously they went way too far, way too fast. But we still don't know. I mean, yeah, we can automate this stuff, but we don't really know yet whether it can be more effective. And so, yes, a PE firm, if we were actually building our own business, we might look at it differently. We might say, how do we build the best organization to serve our customers, grow, and we may or may not get to this place where it's 80% bots and 20% humans. I wanted to put that out there just to remind us for that. Number 2, I think while we have seen a drop in entry-level jobs, people being hired, I think that there's a combination of things going on economically that are slowing that. They're just because people are nervous and there's almost so much uncertainty. But I also think there's this moment where a junior person can do so much more than they ever could before. And so I wonder, as we start to think about the future of this team, is it about having utility players who know how to use these tools and can move around and cover a lot of ground because they now can move so much faster. And so that's about judgment and curiosity and willingness to learn. And, that starts to be the scorecard. I mean, and to me, that's sort of the perfect world. This is me, rose-colored glasses on things, but yeah, I'm not ready to say, don't hire anybody junior because you're going to replace them all with bots. That to me is silliness and bad for a long-term organization.
Yeah, and just to give you a counter to that, and I don't know if it's a counter, right? I have a CEO, a small company, $10 million company, right? And they lost their head of HR. But then they have an early in career HR manager. So they were trying to figure out, okay, do I hire another HR lead, or can this HR manager actually do all of HR? So what they actually did was they have this HR manager working with 4 AI agents, specifically designed to do functions, specific team functions in HR. And now they only have that one HR manager with that team of agents doing HR for the entire company. So this is like one scenario where entry level actually became, the one that's now leading HR versus the.
I feel like that's so risky, though.
I know, and we don't know. I would talk to me in a year or 2 years. Have they built a
Yeah.
great company with a big culture? Have they done things that actually propel it, or have
That's
they
right.
just been efficient? And again, we have to just differentiate in all these conversations between efficiency and effectiveness. And if you just look at it efficiency, there's going to be a lot of mistakes made in these tools. So let's talk about efficiency. One of the questions is, how do you think of measuring AI investments, and what kind of things are you seeing out there, or what recommendations are you making when it comes to measuring AI investments?
I think it depends a little bit on your company and your team and the work that you're doing. So you have all of the usual KPIs that you measure as a marketing team, as a CMO, and it could be MQLs, SQLs, it could be leads generated, website visits. I think you need to keep track of all of those. But when you're talking about AI efficiency, I think the best way is to sit down with your team and you track or you transcribe the manual process that you were doing before, and then you do the new process and you look at where you've saved time, and then you can do a comparison. And then you also want to look at, are you saving budget? So do you have to hire less agency time? Do you need fewer translators? So again, another project Liza and I did, they looked at it holistically, where they tracked the hours of the internal team. They also looked at budget saved. And then the other metric I really love that a lot of people forget is team satisfaction. What they found was that because people were spending less time on these boring tasks they didn't like, they were delegating them to AI, the team sentiment went up, like, I don't know, 15 points. It was really high. And you cannot underestimate the value of a happy team. A happy team have curiosity, they come up with new ideas, they innovate, and then they drive more revenue for your company. So I think of it as hours saved, budget saved, and team happiness.
Well, and I love that you did that, got to the team happiness thing, because ultimately, that what the AI is going to allow you to do is be equally competitive with everybody else who has these AI tools. So what it's going to take is human reimagining, going to your third pillar, Liza. And so let's focus a little bit on that and reimagining, and what kind of applications and use cases are you seeing? Because if there's a lot of reimagining going, then we can, we're delivering a lot of this happiness that you're talking about, Tahnee, because people feel good when they're contributing new things and thinking and products and ways to go to market to their companies.
Well, actually, I was going to share, when Liza was talking on the last topic, one of the things that I thought about was something she'd posted on LinkedIn. And it was this idea that the teams that are winning today are the ones that are thinking about these niche solutions for prospects and customers. And then they go out and they build a Claude artifact, like something interactive. So instead of writing a blog post, they'll create a quiz that someone can go and actually have an experience using. And I feel like the teams that are going to be successful are the ones that they get rid of that rote work that they don't want to do anymore. And then they can spend more time thinking up fun, creative ways to connect with prospects and customers like that.
And
I just stole your,
and Liza,
one of the things that you had done, and I loved it so much.
Have you seen this in action?
Yeah, I just put in the post so you can read that, where the ideas are no longer trapped in our heads, right? Like, I have all sorts of ideas, but to make them come to life, I would need a software developer, I would need a designer and all sorts of things, right? But now, almost in a single prompt, we can make our ideas come alive. To Tahnee's point, a blog post becomes a quiz, a spreadsheet that's an ROI model becomes an interactive calculator. So those are some simple things of reimagining. And there's this saying that we can't reimagine in the future by simply automating the past. So, if I could just push the example a little bit more, it's like we're at that Henry Ford moment, we can't just like have more faster horses, we got to build a car, right? So like in marketing teams right now, those who are AI forward in marketing are now using AI teammates, not just within their teams, but are now connecting across the go-to-market motion. So they have custom GPTs, gems, or cloud projects that connect from product launches to sales enablement materials, to onboarding sales, all the way through what questions should be CS representatives be asking when they're dealing with a customer that's using this product. And that entire workflow is now in one. We have broken down the silos. So that is my dream, right? That the silos between sales, marketing, and CS breaks down, and what we truly measure is the customer experience and the ultimate impact to the customer.
I love that. I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because we're talking about sales enablement next month in Huddles, and and this month we spent the time talking about AI and use cases, and several huddlers had actually built a GPT where they had dumped in all their battle cards, dumped in all their customer interviews, their winning stories and everything, and created essentially the ultimate sales enablement GPT. So now they can just go, I'm talking to this customer, and they even created the framework. This customer's this situation, here we are. Give me what objections they're going to do. Give me the key points that I should be talking about, and it's been incredibly helpful. But again, good input in helps reimagine, and all it takes is a couple of salespeople to use this, and whoa, okay, that was a lot better. And then if there's any kind of learning loop, which we didn't get to, so. Again, I found that a very inspiring story. And I think that folks tend to learn, and when they hear about other use cases, and I want to make sure that you are not thinking of another use case here that you would love for more marketers to adopt.
Yeah, if we could just go beyond the use case, this person that I mentioned that did that workflow from marketing to sales to CS, she was the director of demand generation and integrated campaigns at a company. She has actually reimagined her work. She is now a go-to-market engineer, go-to-market architect, right? So when people say, hey, AI is going to take our jobs, this is now a new job that she created for herself.
Right.
Which is just, I think, brilliant. And I can see it in every aspect of marketing. The field marketers, they're creating localized campaigns, and they're not just doing language translation and localization and planning events. They're actually feeding the surveys and feedback from their local markets back into product marketing, which in the past, field marketing was primarily about events. Now they have the ability to think strategically. Oh, I got this feedback from my customers that will actually help us in product development. So that feedback goes back to product marketing. And I'm just so excited about that opportunity for marketing to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And
I love.
Kathy, I want to jump in here because Kathy had asked a question about salaries decreasing because of what's happening here. And I think Lisa's point right now about marketers and people in our team who are providing more value, if you can prove that you're providing that value, that's worth more. And what I've been hearing, I think it's early days. I don't know that there's a lot of research out there yet that proves the point, but what I've been hearing people say is that the folks that are taking advantage of AI and using it to do the things like Lisa's talking about, they're earning more. They're earning more in salaries because
The
they're
stat
driving.
is like 56%, Tahnee.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yes.
McKinsey. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, so I think, Kathy, the opposite will be happening. You will have smaller teams, but the people who are driving value will be earning more.
So interesting. I think going back to getting your hands on the keyboard, there is, a huge risk for CMOs right now to be perceived as AI, right? It's like, it used to be pre-digital. Oh yeah, well, you're a pre-digital marketer. Now it's sort of pre-gen AI. And I do think that being able to show, and we're going to go back to something that you said, Tahnee, workflow is a great example. We charted all our workflows. We decreased the time it takes us to get XYZ done so we can show the efficiency. But I think where the CMOs have a potential is they want a seat at the table. They want to drive strategy. They suddenly have this thought partner that can help them drive strategy in a whole new way. And I think there's probably there's some transparency in showing and driving strategy using these tools and showing the organization, particularly CEO, who may not be into it yet, that they can do this, that they can be the superhero, that suddenly they are the strategy engineer that the company probably needed. So I don't think there's a choice right now for a CMO. And I do know CMOs who have gotten jobs of late because they were able to project such an AI first attitude.
Yeah, I love that, Drew. And I think it goes beyond strategy. I think the key differentiator for us as CMOs is I can't think of a single person on that C-suite that can actually balance automation with a human touch or personalization with transparency or efficiency with empathy, right? Like the brand part of this is so important, the human part of it. And I just can't see the other members of the C-suite to be so deeply understanding of that aspect of it. The human and the machine, right? Like we have to balance those things because I think that in the era of AI, our new currency is trust. If people don't trust us, I don't care if you've got exceptional product market fit, people don't trust you, they're not going to buy. And people's radars are up, right? So I think that is also just one of the things that is, it's not highlighted that the CMOs absolutely have.
Yeah, does trust show up in EBITDA? I mean, we know it does, but a numbers cruncher might miss that. So, but I would argue that trust has always been the core of brand. That is essentially what brand is trust or lack of.
But think about this, Drew, right? Like somebody puts in a prompt, an AI search. I'm a leader in IT. I have a global team. I'm looking for project management software. I want software that will allow us to have a single source of truth. It allows us to collaborate on a number of deeply technical projects. Give me a competitive analysis of the top project management software, evaluate them on a scale of 1 to 5 on the following parameters, and give me an overall assessment of each one, and give me key insights of strengths and weaknesses of each one, and tell me in which situations might one be better than the other. That's the prompt, right? And guess what? AI does searches, research. It looks at reviews, it looks at publications, articles, it looks at Glassdoor, it looks at our websites, looks at everything and forms an opinion about us before a human being does. Well, guess what? That's about trust, right? It's looking for trust signals. And until the CMO in marketing truly understands that, I don't see anybody else in the C-suite doing that, right? If we don't show up in AI, we're invisible. So this is just one of those things that I think it will rise. This whole thing around trust and brand will rise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I mean, there's a lot of conversation that this could bring back and save PR because that is one of the ways that, the trusted sources and so forth. So, and certainly Trust Radius's research on buying behavior suggested that as well. Real quick, because we're running out of time. Is there any tool right now that you're like just like a newish or new iteration of a tool that you're just like, really excited about?
There's so many, Drew.
I
Like,
know.
I have a list. I have a Notion database. If anybody wants to see it, let me know and I can share that. Maybe I'll give you the link, Drew. And because
Please.
Grant actually asked for a matrix. I don't have a matrix per se, but I did pop in a link to a copywriting comparison that I keep track of because I think that's there's just so many. But anyway, so you have that link, but I'll share the other one with you, Drew.
Okay, so we'll in the recap of this, we'll
Yeah,
include that link. So yes, please, thank you. That'd be
great.
awesome.
Well, what I'd love to hear is if there are any areas that your attendees are interested in, because if you follow the MarTech landscape report, there are 14,000
I know.
tools available today. So like to pick a favorite out of those is really
Right.
fun.
No,
So
I think one of the interesting ones that just came up on our Slack channel was someone who's struggling with, they have a lot of projects that they're managing related to AI, and they didn't think that Asana or some of the other classic project management tools, they were wondering if there are any other tools out there that might be good that are specific.
Catching me into something.
you should look at ClickUp and Notion.
Okay.
For AI SDR tools, we've been hearing that they're good for pilots. They're not, I don't think, fully baked yet, but a couple of the popular ones are Relevance and 11x. You could try those two.
Right. Okay.
Demand gen. I don't know, it depends. Like there's so much you can do in demand gen, but I think Sixth Sense has some really interesting things happening. They have something called conversational email that you could take a look at that might help you out. There's a lot of new little like ad tools popping up. So if you're running advertising, I've got a couple in my list for that one. AI apps that recommends the best AI. That's very meta.
Okay, Liza, any other tools that just, I know, I mean, it's almost a crazy ask, but you know, we can't help ourselves.
Well, this is why I partner with Tahnee, because she's exceptional in understanding all the more tech tools out there. I lean on the foundational models, and they are getting better and better every day. So it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Perplexity are my top 4 picks right
And
now.
it feels like, at least in your case, and I know for me, you got to have at least 2, and it's just to keep yourself honest. And I think it's even in the workflow building. We had one CMO described their sort of copy drafting, and then it's a connection within a little piece of software that connects it, and then there's another GPT that does the scrubbing and takes out all the non-words and all the and does that. And in this case, it was two chat GPTs, but one could argue that you could have gone to Claude and created your editor, your master editor for that. Okay. As we approach the end, let's go sort of back to the beginning here, which is we're talking about the AI-powered marketing team. And I'm wondering if you could offer some final words of wisdom, and we'll start with you, Tahnee, for CMOs looking to create this semi-future but planted in today AI-powered marketing team.
I would say be proactive. I'm echoing what I started with, but I think it's so important is as a CMO, your job is to facilitate this transformation. So don't wait. Nobody has the answer. There's no set of instructions, as Liza likes to say. You just have to figure it out. And so be proactive and don't assume that your team will generate their own AI literacy. That's something that you have to work with them on.
Yeah, and you have to build a culture. Like we always talked about building a learning culture. Well, it's a AI learning culture now. And if you don't have that, it's going to be a problem for your employees, and frankly, it'll be a problem for you. Okay, so proactive. Liza, final words of wisdom.
Yeah, so I can't overemphasize the need for AI literacy, right? We can't just give our teams a bunch of tools and expect them to know how to use it. Because even if you look at just ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini and their homepages, right? It's got a single conversation box. Like, and people are just start, they're supposed to just start typing, and to go from that to actually figuring out segmentation, targeting, and positioning, that's like a really big leap, right? So I think, inspiring people with what's possible with AI by function in marketing. You know, you can't show a product marketing use case to a digital marketer, and you can't show a digital marketing use case to a field marketer. Like, they need to see how AI can actually help them in their own roles. And then beyond that, it truly is human change management, right? Give them the space to learn. And what that really means is sometimes you have to reprioritize and give them the hours, the time to not just succeed, but fail, because when we fail, we learn, right? And hold some show and tells and have a Slack channel where they share and elevate those trailblazers. So.
And it's so funny. It goes back to, pre-AI, we talked about innovation days and innovation weeks and sharing and doing these things. It's the same thing with just an AI twist. Well, Tahnee Perry, Liza Adams, thank you so much. Where can people find you? And Liza, where do people find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn daily.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right, that's easy. Tahnee, the same thing?
Same. Just if you type in search, our names will come up, but LinkedIn is the best place. Feel free to connect with us. We love building our community, so we'd love to see you on there.
Yeah, and subscribe to our newsletters. We're prolific and we share everything because we believe that when we share, it elevates all boats. Rising tide lifts all boats.
I love it. Well, thank you again for joining us.